What's up, everybody? Happy Sunday. I hope you're having a great day. Today is June 8th of the countdown to my big 50th, the big 50. And today we're going to be talking about faith being my foundation. I know we talked about a lot of other things in this series so far, but all of that ties down to one single thing, and that's what your foundation is. Now, the first thing I want to do first, before we get into anything, is I'm not here to preach anything to anybody. I'm not here to push my beliefs on you. I'm not here to say, hey, you know what? You got to give up everything that you're doing. Go follow Jesus, and this is what's going to be for you. The only thing I've been doing in this entire series is just talking about my own personal growth, my own development, and giving tips and just sharing with the world what has worked for me, if that makes sense. Now, with all these daily topics that we've been going over, it's been a lot of good reflection for me. It's been good for me to grow, to look back and be like, hey, I went through that. Oh my God, how did I go through that? We talked about overcoming fear. We talked about speech impediments. We talked about growing your business. We talked about dealing with haters, depression. We learned to laugh at ourselves. And while all those topics are great, they're all individual topics. For me, all those topics and the ones that we're going to be discussing until the 18th day of this video series is grounded by one thing, and that's my foundation. And that for me is my faith. Now, I'm not going to paint a pretty picture. I'm not a perfect person. I have my faults. I fail daily. I do certain things that I shouldn't be doing, but it's better than where I was, if that makes sense to people. Where I was before and who I am now is two different people. Before, if I failed, it didn't matter. It wasn't even a failure because I didn't see it. I didn't acknowledge it because I didn't know I was doing anything wrong. I just figured, hey, you know what? Oh, well, that's how life is. But the moment my wife took me to my first church, I grew up Catholic. So back then, I really didn't know anything. I was already in trouble anyways. If I went to Sunday thing, I went to Sunday. I didn't even understand it anyways because they were speaking in Latin. I still don't get it. And I'm not knocking the Catholic Church. But the moment I moved back from California to Texas to start a new life, I didn't immediately hit the church thing. I know she was going to church and stuff, but it just wasn't for me. It never was for me. It never helped. It never clicked for me. And I'm just being real. I don't want to paint a pretty picture. I don't want to say things and come off fake. It just wasn't for me. I admired people until that day. I went to church and, I was hungover. I mean, man, my head was splitting in half. I was so hungover. I was still going through my addiction phase and stuff like that, but not acknowledging it, if it makes sense. I was just hiding it very well from everybody. But the preacher was just, every single word that he was saying was just tearing straight into me, tearing straight into my soul, into my chest, just like, bam, bam. And he wasn't saying it in a negative way, or a condescending way or making me feel outcasted from everybody else. But that delivery of that message was for me. And that's what happened. I went and I did the thing, raised my hand, and I started my procession, I guess, my progress, my changes in my life that day. Now, even though I said, hey, you know what, God, help me, this and that, this and that, this and that, I still didn't make that pact. I just kind of just went through the motions, and I was like, yeah, it's me, I did that. They all clapped and everything else, but there wasn't that straight connection until later. A year later, my daughter was born, and I remember saying to God, hey, you know what? Bring her into this world and just bring her healthy. And I give you my life. I surrender to you. I give up my addictions. I'll give up everything. And, I recommitted myself that day. And I quit my addiction, and it helped me quit my addiction because I made that promise. I knew I couldn't back down on that promise, especially because I put something with purpose. It was my daughter. And that's how it processed. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you. I backslid. Not with my addictions, but with other things. I just wasn't living that right life. I made a lot of errors. Be as a father, as a husband, as a friend, as whatever I was doing at that time. We weren't into photography, and I wasn't on here. I wasn't doing all this stuff. I mean, we're talking about 20 something years in the making. 40 something years of a story that I'm writing, and I'm still writing on the daily. So my other daughter was born, and I just kept in and out, just on. I'll be honest with you. I didn't think that God was doing a whole lot of things in my life. I'm like, hey, you know what? You didn't make everything perfect like they're saying. You didn't make this and make that, and I'm going through this and I'm going through that. So I still wasn't committed. Now, my last baby girl was being born, and we ran into complications. We ran into some serious complications, and I'll let my wife say that story in full detail. But we were asked to make a decision, whether to continue or cancel, and I didn't want to give up. And that's when the changes started. That's when I started seeing movement. And today they were talking about faith in crisis. When things happen, how do you react? That was my crisis moment. And I remember after we were talking to tons of doctors and stuff like that, and they're saying, well, this is the possibilities, this is the chances, this is what's going to happen, And I left, we looked at this screening, when they do the screening of the stomach to see how the child's developing. And they still didn't give us any good information. And I left, I didn't want to cry. I didn't want to do all that stuff. I didn't want to break down on my wife because I knew she needed someone a little bit stronger. Yeah, not in the faith because I was still on the fence, but I couldn't break down. So I didn't have anybody to discuss that with, So I remember when they said, okay, now we got to make a decision. You're going to have to go and sit with your wife in the room, and then we'll come back and we'll make a final decision. This is the last moment. If you're going to proceed or you're going to take the risks, of both my wife and my daughter. So we looked at each other and I said, hey, when we're talking, we're both, I started shedding some tears. She's crying too. And I said, hey, I'm going to go to the bathroom. And I'm saying this for detail because I remember it because it stayed in me. So I went to the bathroom and I hit the floor and I prayed. I was like, hey, you know what? Don't do this. Please don't do this. I'll give you me. I promise. Whether I fail you, I'm going to keep trying to make a change. I'm going to keep pushing forward. Just if I fall, just lift me up. But I'm giving it to you. I'm going to make this change. I believe in you, and I'm going to take this leap of faith, and I'm not canceling that. I can't do that. So we went back in there, and we talked to the doctor, and we're like, no, we're gonna go through with everything. So this was the last phase of the pregnancy where they can do that kind of stuff, and they were still trying to call us and everything like that. But we kept the faith, and we kept moving forward, believing in Him that He's gonna make some kind of change and show up and show out. I'm not saying like He's some kind of character, like some kind of mystical thing, like, hey, let me show up for you. But that's what I was doing. That's how I talk. So we kept going with the process. So with that, it tested our faith for several months to come, long nights, praying, everybody praying in the house and coming together, believing. She would still cry and stuff like that. But my connection was growing. And changes were happening. At that moment, the crisis that we were being faced with, was devastating everything. Our house was in shambles because of this. Relationships between my other daughters and my wife and us and this and that, and people angry. Emotions, it's fear. Fear does that. Fear of loss. So it comes a day that she's born. And the whole night, up to that moment, I'm like, God, please, God, please prove me wrong. Show me your power. Show me what you got. And boom, the baby came out. They're like, my wife told me immediately, count the toes, count the hands, make sure she's okay. perfect. Beautiful. I started crying and this and that. And that was my moment. That was my, all right, I'm yours, brother. And he hasn't failed me since. My child, she's 17 years old. And she was that bridge. She was my crisis moment and what I needed to do and react. He was like, all right, I've done this before for you. I've taken you through this. I've brought you through the darkness of all this stuff and your addictions and every single moment in your life. I've been there for you. Just, you're not listening. William, you're not listening. Let me do this. And it opened up my eyes. But at that moment, that's when you realize, what am I going to do? Am I going to break? Am I going to fold? I could have easily went back to addictions, That's what most people do, is they go right back to an addiction, especially if you have some kind of issue. But it strengthened me. Now, like I said, I still fail. I fail on the daily, every single day. But like when we were talking the other day about learning to laugh at yourself, appreciation of life, I wake up with that. Now, when I wake up in the mornings, I say, hey, you know what? Thank you for the breath of life in me. Thank you for bringing me into this life. Whatever comes my way, we'll deal with it. And that's hard still, because you're like, wow. It's hard to hear someone say, hey, you know what? Just put it in God's hands. Let go. Quit trying to drive the whole thing. And I'm doing that. I'm doing my best. Yeah, I'm still going through a roller coaster of emotions when things happen, tires, flats, or whatever the case is. But my foundation is a strong foundation. Now, when you have a strong foundation, you can apply that with everything. If you have a strong foundation, you can withstand a lot. I love the palm trees. I know I've spoken about that before. But I love the palm trees. Like if you go to like Miami or all these kind of like hurricane places, you'll see those palm trees kind of bent like this, all kinds of different shapes. And I could stare at them for I swear to God, I could stare looking at a palm tree and be in awe for like 15, 20 minutes, just like staring at it. Because it's a reminder that with a strong foundation, I can withstand any storm. I can withstand anything. I can withstand things like creating a business. Creating a business is one of the most biggest things to test you as a person, you as your talent, your craft. But most of all, it's going to test your foundation. Sorry, I get a little excited, so I'm starting to stutter a little bit. But it tests your foundations and what you truly believe and how far you'll go for things. Having a foundation and something to fall upon or to stand on instead of falling. I like to use the word fallen for me because I fall all the time. We face different things in business or like on here on this YouTube channel, I'll put a video out and it can either be good or it could be a flop. Today when I was in church, I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm doing this video series, Lord. I pray over it. Has it taken off like I wanted it to and explode and reach people? No, it has not. But I'm putting it in your hands today, Lord. Bless today's message for anybody that needs to hear it. Anybody that needs to know what they can turn to. Like I said, I'm not here to preach to you. I'm not here to tell you, hey, you know what? God's going to make everything all right. You got to be this and that. Because I see the comments, like I said yesterday, I'm doing this. Today is like Monday and it's like a little faith message, and I'll get the little remarks from the student, like people, like today I got one, and it was trust in God and He'll pull you through. Well, this little kid, he doesn't look like a kid. He's like 19, 20, whatever the case is. He decides to go and put a comment like, hey, God's not real. This is crazy AF. No, he put, this is fake AF. And I got kind of upset. I'm like, dude, why would you do that? Why would you say that? But then I have to understand where it's coming from. I have to understand that some people are going to think that way because things in their life, kind of like how I did. Now, I would never go and tell somebody that. I wouldn't go and post it. Sometimes some of these comments that they put out there is just to raise other people to laugh, to enjoy and come into their darkness and involve them in their sulkness. Or they just might not believe. I'm not here to preach anybody about anything. I'm telling you about what's worked for me. I'm kind of dumbfounded on my TikToks. You know, I started dropping those daily things there too. And I was afraid, you know. I don't go to anybody and say, hey, you know what, you got to do this, you got to do that. I don't go out there and be like, hey, hand out little this and that to people, like pamphlets saying or that, or ride bikes, be Jehovah's Witness, or come knock on doors. I don't do that stuff. The only thing I could do is show what I believe, show the change in me, especially with people that used to know me. The people that knew me in the past know that how I was. And when I run into them now, they're like, dude, this is a completely different person. So with that, the only thing I could do is just reflect his goodness with what I do. I'm gonna fail, you know, but I'm failing forward. I'm failing on a foundation that I can be like, you know what, like if I get knocked down, I can get right back up, wipe myself off, take it on the chin, and then move forward and be like, hey, you know what? Now, there are people that attest that. I got a lot of them. I got a lot of jokers that will test my faith, but I can't give that to them because it's not mine. And I owe it to too many people. So with that, try faith as a foundation. Pray over your business. Pray over your family. Pray over your problems. Pray over your social medias. Pray over things that you do, and seek where you need to have some kind of foundation. And that for me is the faith. So I thought that would be my message for today. I'm going to cut it short. Tomorrow's going to be day 9 of the 18-day countdowns to my 50th. I hope this message was for you. If it was, leave a comment. I read all the comments. Leave good comments. You got to remember, these people are not only watching these videos, but they're looking at the comments. And it's just sad to see people leave a comment like that. I felt bad for the person. I deleted and blocked them, but I felt bad. I'm like, hey, look, you know what? You totally missed the message. So if I want my business to strive, if I want things in this life to go good, it's hot in here, sorry. I know where it's coming from. I know where I have to give it to. I know I have to pray over everything, and I have to have a strong belief. And I have to understand and respect the fact that I'm going to fail, but I can get right back up. And he's still going to love me, and he's still going to be there for me. So I'm going to cut that short. I hope you have a wonderful Sunday. Tell somebody that you love them. Express that you love them. Smile. It's a highly contagious thing. And we'll see you tomorrow. Deuces.